Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay updated with our latest video. In the note he left behind, Randolph Scott admitted everything. Randolph Scott was born George Randolph Scott on January 23, 1898, in Orange County, Virginia. He became one of Hollywood's most famous and enduring actors, especially in the Western genre. His career spanned from the silent film era of the 1920s to the late 1960s, and he became a loved symbol of American masculinity and stoic heroism. Scott was more than just an actor, he embodied a certain American ideal, one of strength, honor, and a strong sense of self-identity. His legacy lives on through his movies, the many tributes paid to him by his co-workers, and the millions of people who enjoyed his work. Randolph Scott grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina in a well-to-do family. His father George Grant Scott was a certified public accountant while his mother Lucille Crane Scott managed the household and raised Randolph alongside his siblings. The family was well connected socially, and this afforded Scott a comfortable upbringing with access to good education and opportunities. He attended private schools and later enrolled at Georgia Institute of Technology, where he briefly pursued engineering. However, World War I interrupted his studies. During World War I, Scott enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he served in France as part of the 2nd Trench Mortar Battalion. Although he never saw heavy combat, his military experience instilled in him a sense of discipline and maturity that would shape his personality both on and off the screen. After the war, Scott returned home with an appreciation for the values of service, honor, and patriotism. These traits would later influence many of the roles he took on in his film career, particularly in the westerns for which he became famous. After the war, Scott briefly returned to North Carolina, but he soon became restless. He was drawn to the burgeoning film industry in Hollywood, which was quickly becoming the entertainment capital of the world. In the early 1920s, with the encouragement of his father, Scott moved to California to pursue a career in acting. He enrolled in acting classes and began working as an extra and bit player in silent films. His good looks, tall frame, and natural athleticism got him noticed right away, and he quickly found steady work in small parts. When he met director Cecil B. DeMille, who was one of the most important directors in Hollywood at the time, Scott got his big break. DeMille liked the way Scott behaved and gave him a number of small but important parts in early sound movies. These jobs helped Scott become better known, and soon he was getting bigger supporting parts. His early movies, like Virginia, 1929, and The Last Roundup, 1934, showed that he could be a great main man. Especially in westerns, where his natural cowboy-like presence seemed perfect. Randolph Scott's career truly took off in the 1930s and 1940s when he became one of Hollywood's most bankable stars in western films. He quickly found his niche in the genre, starring in a string of successful westerns that solidified his reputation as the quintessential cowboy hero. Films like Last of the Mohinn 1936, Jesse James 1939, and Western Union 1941 helped establish him as one of the most popular actors of his time. His calm, steady demeanor combined with his rugged good looks and tall athletic build made him the ideal embodiment of the Western hero. What set Scott apart from other Western stars of the era was his ability to bring depth and nuance to what could have otherwise been simple one-dimensional roles. His characters were often morally complex men who were forced to navigate difficult situations, making him a relatable and human hero. He didn't play loud or flamboyant characters. Instead, he brought a quiet strength and stoicism to his performances that resonated with audiences. His characters were men of few words but great action, reflecting the traditional American values of hard work, perseverance, and honesty. In the 1950s, Randolph Scott started working with director Bud Ober. Together, they made a series of westerns that are now thought to be some of the best in the genre. These movies, often called the Roan Cycle after the production company that Scott and Harry Joe Brown started, included classics like 7 Men from Now, 1956, The Tall T, 1957, and Ride Lonesome, 1959. Baker made short movies with strong characters that often dealt with revenge, redemption, and the hard realities of life in the Old West. Some of Scott's best roles were in these movies, where he played more adult roles. The characters in these movies were worn out and dealing with their own moral problems. In many ways, these movies were the pinnacle of Scott's acting career, as he brought all of his experience and weight to these parts. The partnership between Scott and Boer is now seen as one of the most successful in Western film history, and these movies have influenced many filmmakers and actors who came after. While Randolph Scott played a rough, lone cowboy on screen, his personal life was stable and private. In 1936, he married Marion DuPont, daughter of wealthy industrialist William DuPont. Their marriage didn't last long, though, and they divorced 3 years later. In 1944, Scott married Patricia Stillman, and they stayed together until his death in 1987. They had 2 children together, Sandra and Christopher, and lived a quiet, private life in Beverly Hills, away from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Scott was famous for being a pious Christian. He stayed devoted to his family and church his whole life, even though he was one of Hollywood's most famous faces. Scott liked to stay out of the spotlight. He avoided the tabloid scandals and problems that affected many of his peers, and he rarely did interviews or went to public events. People who knew him said he was a modest, soft-spoken man who cared more about his family and hobbies like golf than about fame or money. In fact, after retiring from acting in 1962, Scott disappeared from public view, choosing to spend his last years in peace. He had appeared in over 100 movies. After Ride the High Country came out in 1962, Randolph Scott stopped acting. The movie is widely thought to be one of the best westerns ever made and was directed by Sam Peppa. In the movie, Scott starred with fellow western legend Joel McCrea. It was a perfect end to Scott's long and successful career, unlike many actors who have trouble letting go of their careers. Scott took it all in and decided to move to Southern California and live a quiet, private life. Scott stayed involved in his community and was an avid golfer who often played in charity tournaments. He also extended assistance to others, particularly through his Christian faith. He became a member of the Bel Air Country Club and relished the tranquil, relaxed lifestyle he had diligently strived for. Scott was known to be a quiet person, and after he retired, he mostly stayed out of the public eye. He dedicated his time to activities he enjoyed, such as golf, and closely monitored his investments, having been a shrewd businessman throughout his life. Famous actor Randolph Scott, who played tough and stoic characters in classic westerns, left a lasting legacy in Hollywood that continues to captivate audiences today. However, despite playing a man of few words on screen, Scott's personal life was marked by a depth of emotion and introspection that few truly understood during his lifetime. In a stunning revelation, it was a note he left behind that would give a glimpse into the man behind the cowboy hat and the gunslinger roles, which gave us a unique look into his heart and mind throughout his career. Randolph Scott was the perfect Western hero. He was tall and lean, and his eyes were sharp. Through his eyes, he became a symbol of manliness, honor, and power. His characters frequently embodied men of principle, confronting the perils of the frontier with a resolute sense of morality. His career, highlighted by movies like Ride the High Country and Comanche Station, lasted more than 30 years, making him one of the most popular and bankable Western stars. However, despite his fame and the extravagant persona Hollywood cultivated around him, Scott remained notoriously private. His fans loved him, but not much was known about his personal life beyond the occasional press photo or public appearance. He was the strong, silent type, both on and off the screen, and he rarely gave interviews, preferring to let his work speak for itself. As a result, much of Scott's true self remained shrouded in the same mystery that surrounded his characters for years. There was a lot of talk about Randolph Scott's personal life. Some people in Hollywood talked about the actor's relationships, especially his long-term friendship with fellow actress Cary Grant. Scott and Grant lived together in a Malibu beach house for years, which led to rumors about their relationship and Scott's sexuality, a taboo topic in Hollywood at the time. However, Scott never spoke out against these rumors in public. He remained silent and focused on establishing his reputation as a Western hero in private. However, it's thought that Scott struggled with his identity, so Scott may have felt trapped by the fame that had made him so successful, as he faced societal expectations and the pressure to maintain a certain image in an era when the movie industry often expected actors to conform to traditional gender roles and public personas. It wasn't until after Scott's death at age 89 in 1987 that the world learned about the long-lasting inner conflict that had been plaguing the actor. Among his belongings was a handwritten note that he left for his family and close friends. The short but deep note showed a side of Randolph Scott that no one had ever seen. Scott said he was lonely his whole life, despite being famous and having friends worldwide. The note also talked about the difficulties in his relationships and hinted at regrets and missed chances. For in his note, Scott expressed his regret for the barriers he had erected in his personal and professional lives to prevent the public from viewing his private life. He acknowledged that his fame had hindered his ability to live truthfully, which was perhaps the most heartfelt thing he had to say. And the most heartwarming thing Scott said was that he wished he could have been more open about who he really was without worrying about fame. Being judged or losing his job. However, he didn't directly address the rumors about his relationship with Cary Grant or his sexuality. The tone of the letter made it sound like Scott had been keeping something from many people for a long time. His statement wasn't about something scandalous but about a deep personal hurt. He realized that the public image he had created had prevented him from fully embracing his true self. A long time ago, I came across a picture of Cary Grant and Randolph Scott standing very close to each other. Both men were wearing frilly monogrammed aprons and staring into each other's eyes, clarifying it that they were dating. As a childhood hero of mine, Randolph Scott's sexuality has been the subject of more speculation than Cary Grant's, probably because Scott wasn't as famous and Grant was more private. However, what is known about Cary Grant makes it even more clear that he was gay, which in turn makes it becomes increasingly evident that Cary Grant's relationship with Scott extended beyond mere friendship prior to his rise to fame in Hollywood. With future Hollywood designer I. Kelly, which Kelly wrote about in his memoirs, which were only recently made public as an actor who was having a hard time. Grant was also recognized for relying on the generosity of strangers. Tennessee Williams would have said that he described himself as, not quite a rent boy but definitely a bit of a gigolo because he used his charms on wealthy older men. During his time in Hollywood, Grant was a client of the pimp Scotty Bowers, who set up many dates for young men. Grant clearly set up many of his early marriages to conceal his sexuality, and there was little effort to pretend otherwise at the time. Like Scott, Grant eventually settled down in longer heterosexual relationships, but so did most gay men of the time. It was necessary to survive, especially if you were famous. The 1950s, tabloid tell-all journalism made being carefree about your private life riskier than in the 1930s and 1940s. In short, it is widely speculated that Grant and Scott were lovers. I'm happy for them and wish they could have lived in a time when they could have. The note from Randolph Scott allowed me to express myself without fear of judgment. Has forever changed how people think about the actor. For decades, fans and historians considered Scott to be a simple, strong, and honest man who embodied the values of the Old West. But the note revealed a more nuanced and complex person, one whose inner life was filled with the same doubts, fears, and emotional struggles that many people face. For many, the note has also led to a re-evaluation of the pressures Hollywood actors faced during Scott's time. The golden age of Hollywood was notorious for strictly enforcing gender norms and not allowing anything to be different from the norm. Stars' personal lives were closely watched. For Scott, this meant a life of emotional restraint, where living openly and honestly was not an option. The note reminds us of the human cost of these societal expectations and the sacrifices many artists made. It has also changed his family, who had always respected his privacy, now had a sense of closure. Learned more about the emotional burden he had been carrying. His close friends finally got a glimpse of the thoughts and feelings he had often kept from them. In many ways, the note was a final act of honesty and vulnerability for Scott. It was a way for him to express in depth the feelings he had struggled to talk about in life. His movies will always be remembered for showing tough guys like Frontier Justice, but Scott's note has added a new layer to the story of one of Hollywood's most famous icons. It has helped fans see a more sensitive and interesting side of the man behind the myth, and it has started conversations about the problems actors face in the public eye, the sacrifices they make for their job, and the emotional toll of living a life based on what people expect of them. In the end, Randolph Scott's confession doesn't take away from his legacy, it adds to it. By telling the truth, even if it was only in a private note, Scott has helped us respect not only his acting skills but also his humanity. The note is a powerful reminder that even the strongest people have weak moments and that real courage often comes from self-reflection and honesty. Scott's fans can now watch his movies with a new appreciation for the actor who played tough guys but was really looking for connection and peace. Although the contents of Randolph Scott's note have shed light on some aspects of his life, there remains a sense of mystery surrounding the actor. Find the happiness he so desperately sought. And how much of his public image was created out of necessity rather than choice? Randolph Scott's life and last confession teach us that honesty is vital. Scott may have had trouble with this during his lifetime, but his note is a timeless reminder that the truth is always worth telling, no matter how hard it is, for those who loved him, for his fans, and for future generations. Randolph Scott's life and legacy will always show how complex people are and how brave it is to face them.